Welcome to our third set of activities to build executive functioning skills in our kiddos. 3 weeks ago, I gave an introduction into executive functioning skills. 2 weeks ago, I gave you 10 activities involving writing and drawing. Last week, we focused on building activities. And today, this week, we're focusing on working memory games. A lot of these are oral games that can be done anywhere. We've actually done them in the park before. So you can do them at the dinner table, you can do them in the car, you can really do them anywhere. You can do them to start your day or end your day. They help with building our kiddos' working memory. Here we go. Next up, working memory activities. As mentioned, these are things that can be done in the car while you're waiting for something, pretty much anytime, anywhere. A couple of these are common games that you could probably find online, or if you've worked with kids in the past in school or in daycare, you might be familiar with them. The rest of them are things I've made up, and some of them are things that I even do myself when I have downtime. First up, the game of categories. Categories is where you come up with a category, colors, animals, foods, countries, whatever you want it to be, and you go around and everybody in the group gives an example of something in that category. The way this game is designed to be played is that if you cannot think of an example when it's your turn in a certain amount of time, you're out. And the winner is the last person still in the game. I don't like to play that. I don't like time limits on things. I don't like to rush kids with their thinking. I also don't like the concept of somebody being out because they could not think fast enough, or because their vocabulary is not as expansive as other kids. So when we play this, nobody's out. And if one student can't think of examples, I just let other kids continue to think of examples. I also use this game to teach our kids how to give hints or clues. A hint or a clue means you share information without sharing the answer. This can be really difficult for our kids if they're not familiar with the concept. Some kids want to share 5 clues all at one time. Some kids will share things that are so easy that they completely give away the answer. So playing this game is also a really great way to teach kids how to give hints and clues. And there's more of that coming up before we're done today as well. If your kiddos are really good at categories, you can also play it where the answers have to be in alphabetical order. So what's an animal that starts with A? And then the next person has B, and the next person has C. We don't play that way because we have groups of mixed abilities. And again, I don't want anybody to not be able to play just because their cognitive skills are not as sharp as somebody else's, or their thinking lags behind the other kids. We just play it as how many items can we come up with that are in this category. Last year, one of the kids even had the category of games at Starfish Social Club. And so they all went around and named all the games that they could think of that we have here at Starfish. So you can make it about pretty much anything. My only, what's a good word? Suggestion, that's the word, would be to choose categories that the answers are commonly known. For example, if your category is colors, everybody knows what colors are, and they know that if somebody says something like schmeal, that's not a real color. However, if you pick something like TV shows or movies, anybody could say anything. And without looking it up, you wouldn't really know if that was true. So I just recommend sticking to categories where it's known if those are actual answers or not. Rhyme time. This is similar to when we talked about writing the story with 4 words that rhyme. I play this game in my head when I have long runs. So when I'm out running 2 hours, 3 hours, this is one of the things I'll do in my head. I really like word games. It's just little idiosyncrasy that I have. So rhyme time is where I'll just pick a word and I will go through the alphabet and think of all the words that rhyme with that word. So let's just say, obviously, the shorter the word, the easier it is, and the more likely you are to find rhymes. Let's just say I'm going to go with clock. So I'm going to think of the word clock. I'm going to start with A. Is clock a word? It's not. What about block? Oh, B. B has a rhyme. B is block. C is clock. D is dock, right? E, eock. E isn't a rhyme. F isn't a rhyme. G, Glock, if kids know that word. Hawk, if you change the spelling of it, it could be a rhyme. So it's just a fun activity that helps kids with those processing skills. One thing I noticed when we started playing some of these games is that not all of our students are able to follow alphabetical order. Some of them really don't have a concept of alphabetical order. Even kids that are gifted and in advanced classes at school. This goes to show how overlooked executive functioning skills can be, especially in our really advanced kids. I don't feel like alphabetical order is a necessity in life. I don't think it's something anybody needs to know. I do think it's interesting that it's a kindergarten, first grade skill. And I noticed how many of our kids don't have it. It just has to do with that sense of organization and structure. That if your world doesn't really revolve around organization and structure, things like alphabetical order don't seem to have a purpose. So that's something really interesting I learned by playing games like this with our kids. AEIOU is another game I made up, and it's another game I play on long runs. Again, I don't know where these come from. Similar to rhyme time, you start with a word. We'll start with clock again. And you replace the vowel sound with every vowel sound in the alphabet. I don't use Y. You can if you want to. And I see if I can make a word with all by replacing the vowel with all the other vowels. So if I replace the O in clock with an A, clack. Is clack a word? I would say no, but I do know there's a book called Click, Clack, Moo. It's a children's book. So automatically, I didn't even mean to use this as an example, but clack and click is a word. Clack probably doesn't classify as a word, but it's in the title of a book. So maybe we can count it. So that's A. E would be kleck. Kleck is not a word. We've already talked about click, and clock was the original word. The last one is cluck. Is cluck a word? Yes, it's the sound that chickens make, right? I've actually never used that word to play this game before, but I'm super excited about it because it had 4 out of the 5 letters. That's a really high number for this game. So I'm really excited that I just used that word as an example. I'll share with you guys my number 1 so far, my biggest winner of this game. It does have a grammatical exception, so you'll have to allow me the exception if you're going to allow it to be the winner, is the word paddle, paddle, pedal, piddle, poodle, which is the exception, and puddle. Oh, that still makes me so excited when I think about that. But you see how these are just fun games and activities that you can play anytime. Like I said, I do them when I'm running and I crack myself up. I get super excited, but it just keeps my brain working and occupied when I would otherwise kind of lose my mind. Word by word. This one is a really great activity to do verbally in as large of a group as possible. We are going to build sentences, more than sentences if you want to. You could do a paragraph with everybody saying a word at a time. Only one word. This is a really funny activity. And again, it's great for kids who need structure because there is no structure. Whatever word you said, because you had an intention, the next person is going to have a completely different intention. And by the time it gets back to you, the story has nothing to do with the word that you said when it was your turn last time. The kids really love this game because it's funny. It also is a challenge to only think of one word and for your word to tie into not only the previous word so that it makes sense, but also where the story's going. So sometimes I notice that kids struggle with only saying one word, but also with that word being what would come next in this sentence, because maybe they're thinking 3 words ahead, or maybe they repeat the word that someone else just said. So this is a really great activity for multiple executive functioning purposes. Next is the actual game, Guess Who? This is the game where there are cards with characters on them, and each person picks a character and then asks the other person questions to try to basically process of elimination to try to figure out who they chose. This is so good for working memory because it can be difficult for our kids to remember what questions they've already asked. Also, I notice that our kids sometimes have a hard time understanding which questions will have the biggest impact. So this is a really great game to work on asking questions that have the most impact and remembering the questions that we've already asked. We have a younger version of Guess Who. I'm trying to think if it's still called Guess Who. It might have a different name, but it has a version that has animals. It has a version that has food. So it's not all people. I think with people, sometimes we can get a little distracted with the faces and the features. So the food and the animals are really great versions. There's another version on it as well, but I can't remember right now what it is. Number 6 is the game Headbands. Very similar in terms of generating questions and remembering what has already been asked. Headbands is the game where you have the plastic headband and it has a card on it that you cannot see. And your job is to try to ask questions that help you figure out what's on your card. Again, our kids struggle with this because they struggle with understanding what kinds of questions to ask. They struggle with remembering what someone's already told them. So for example, if they ask, am I an animal? And the answer is no. I've heard kids then ask, can I fly? Okay. So just being able to remember what the answers have already been and how to generate new questions. This is also an amazing game to work on hints and clues like we talked about earlier. Amazing for this. I have one student who loves to give hints, but will give 5 in a row. And so the student never even gets to ask a question. Say it's a bumblebee, and the student will say, it's black and yellow, it flies, it buzzes. It's I think there's a Disney movie about bees, or something. It's in the movie, whatever. So the student never even has to ask a question because the other student has given them rapid fire clues and then they figure it out. Number 7 is the game Would You Rather. This is just a word game where you ask, would you rather, and then you give 2 examples. The way that you can play this to reinforce working memory is you can ask, would you rather? And then the answer that the other person gave automatically becomes part of the next question. For example, if I say, would you rather be too hot or too cold? The other person says too hot. So the next question, whether it's me asking it or them asking it or someone else, is, would you rather be too hot or too tired? And now they may say, oh, too tired. Next question, would you rather be too tired or painted purple? Oh, painted purple. Okay, would you rather be painted purple or work in a sewer? But they have to remember the answer that was given. So it's attention to detail. And it may not be their answer. So not remembering what they would answer, but remembering what the other person said. If it's a group, you can do majority. What did the majority of the group say? Okay, that forms our next question. Number 8 is Grandma's House. This is a common game. I did not make this one up. It also has to do with alphabetical order. In this game, you start with the letter A. The premise is that we are going to Grandma's house and we are listing all the things we're taking with us. The first person in the group names something that starts with the letter A. The second person names something that starts with the letter B. Third person C, etc. The challenge to this game is that everybody has to repeat what everyone else has said. So B has to repeat A and then add on B. C repeats A and B and adds on C, etc. This is another great game for working on hints and clues. Even our students with great memories don't remember everything. So it's another awesome opportunity to teach our kids how to give hints and clues. Maybe it's a gesture, maybe it's a word or a phrase. Sometimes I also ask the kids to look at the person who said the answer because that might trigger the answer. Show and tell is actually something that we do as one of our lessons here at Starfish Social Club because it works on so many skills. The person who's showing needs to be able to talk about what they're showing quickly enough to where they don't lose the interest of the group, but long enough to where they explain with enough detail what this thing is. Everybody who is participating needs to at least pretend like they're paying attention by looking toward the person. Then we give them the task of either asking a question or making a comment about everything that everyone else shares. In our lesson, everybody shares 3 things, but just one at a time. So everybody in the group shares their first item. Then everybody shares their second item. Then everybody shares their third. So it's not one student talking for 10 minutes straight. Every time somebody shares an item and talks about it, the rest of the students are responsible for either asking a question about it or making a comment about it. The kids get really engaged during show and tell week, more than I would actually even expect them to be. And They learn so much about each other. Number 10 is social memory. The week after show and tell week, we do social memory week. Our task is to see how many items we can remember that were shared in our group the week before. Our groups typically have 8 students, each sharing 3 items. That's 24 things to remember. Some of our kids have amazing memories and will dominate this conversation. So we don't allow everybody to answer every question. We pick on certain kids and they get to choose a student and an object. So, for example, if I call on Kevin, he can decide who he remembers something about instead of me saying, Kevin, what do you remember about Ben? This is really cool. And the kids really enjoy flexing their memory. They enjoy showing off what they remember about each other.